Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy here with you on yet another, relatively busy week in the longest off-season in history. We actually have a great guest for you today here on the show, Chris Vannini of The Athletic. He covers the group of 5 schools, including UCF, very active on Twitter. He joins us to talk about what's the latest state of the group of 5 in terms of COVID-19, as well as the financial status of all the programs around there, and especially focusing on UCF. Great interview that we had with him. That's coming up in just a short little bit. We're also going to review the NFL draft and the post NFL draft action in the free agency market so far, with UCF players going. Of course, Gabe Davis getting drafted by the Buffalo Bills, an exciting moment for him. Who else might be out there that some NFL teams may give a shot to here? So, but fellas, we're starting to get a little stir crazy, but apparently May 4th, we get phase one, I guess, what is this that the governor's calling it? Phase one,
well, for the record,
restarting of the economy?
For the record, Jeff's alluding to the state of Florida. We're a national podcast. We know we got night fans out throughout the country. So be specific, Jeffrey. Okay, we're not these other podcasts that just talked in our. We're national.
Well, I was trying to make one of my customary opening show bad jokes where I'm like, do we have to run at only 25% capacity?
It wasn't only a bad joke; it was also an incomplete joke. So it's actually even worse.
Okay, fantastic. So we're off to our typical great start. Like we said, lots to talk about. We're going to start with our interview with Chris Vannini, who came out with a couple of really interesting articles over the last couple of weeks, including the most recent one. He obviously works for The Athletic. Has one up there right now with Nicole Auerbach about regional scheduling, the possibility of regional scheduling being very real for schools like UCF and other teams not in the power conferences. And also he's got another, we'll link to these in the show description, his group of 5 survey that came out, which I thought had some pretty interesting stuff. So we talk about that and more with Chris Vannini of The Athletic. Joining us now from The Athletic, he covers the group of 5 schools. He's been a veteran of the sports reporting industry for not quite some time. Actually used to work in his old stomping grounds, or our current stomping grounds, with SB Nation. He's also breaks news on the Coaching Tracker, and was the manager of CoachingSearch.com. Now covering the American and all the other Group of 5 conferences for The Athletic. Chris Vannini joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Hey, Chris, how's social distancing treating you?
It's going well, all things considered. Yeah, I mean, I work out of home anyway, so not much has changed for me, but my wife's been getting a little bit stir crazy.
All the rest of us involved in the same thing too, man. So it's been, but that hasn't stopped us from seeing a lot of news come down the pike here in terms of what football season is going to look like. I guess I'll ask you this right out of the gate here, and if you'll forgive the expression, at gunpoint right now. When is the college football season going to happen, do you think? And when it does happen, what do you think it's going to look like?
I mean, if I had to pick one, I'd say maybe we start in October. Obviously, maybe it starts on time, probably not. Maybe they hold it to the spring. There's a lot of problems that would come with that as well. My guess is they'll want to get it going as soon as they can get it going, especially if there's concerns over a breakout of the virus in the winter. If we hold off until football in February, who knows how things are going to look in February. So I don't know. People know they got to get football. They have to have football happen to make money and run their athletic departments and just generally have their day-to-day stuff. So we'll see. I mean, I'm still a few weeks away from having a real, I think, opinion on this. We're still waiting to see how many schools are going to open and if that's going to happen. To me, it's still a little bit wait and see. I think it's about mid-May when I think we'll have a better grasp on things.
What's the chatter among the group of five and coaches and administrators and because I know you guys have done some surveys and things like that. Is it optimism? Is it pessimistic? Is it are people just divided on this as far as what they think could happen or will happen or should happen? What's kind of the vibe around out there?
I mean, I think everybody's optimistic, but I think, it pays to be optimistic. Nobody wants to be a Debbie Downer at a time like this when so much is on the line. I think especially with the group of five, especially for the lower half of the group of five who play these bye games, they're concerned about a football season that doesn't have non-conference games. And that would take away a payday, a $1 million payday maybe for a game at an Alabama or something like that. And those athletic departments do not have big budgets. Those bye games pay for a lot at these schools. So I think especially for some of the schools who play the bye games, they're very concerned about a season that doesn't have non-conference games. But then again, it's better than not having the season at all. So kind of got to wait and see.
Chris, you wrote an article recently along with your colleague Nicole Auerbach about the group of five ADs or the commissioners and ADs kind of considering cutting down on travel for non-conference and conference games possibly. And you brought up there about the bye games and that these schools, need those bye games to as a cash flow, but through, maybe having games in a more regional setting, there's a possibility that those might be cut down. What are the financial ramifications, or what maybe are some of the losses, some of the drawbacks that could happen with a possible scheduling, and where a lot of teams are scheduling for inside their own region and not outside their own region?
Yeah, a lot of the regional scheduling stuff, and you actually just saw it today. The Big East, the Colonial, and I forgot who the other one, maybe the A10. In baseball but D1 Baseball reported that they're going to have a scheduling alliance among those teams on the East Coast there. And the idea is for those sports that don't bring in money, they got to find ways to save money. You can play a football game across the country for a bye game because you're getting a lot of money for it. You're getting the money back. If you're a tennis, a volleyball, something like that, a baseball, you're probably not bringing in the money back. So they're trying to find ways to save money on stuff like that. And I talked to Danny White about it. And, UCF has been really good recently in the men's tennis team. The volleyball team have been really good recently. And those sports, like everybody else in the country, they'll play in California. The volleyball team did a tournament in Illinois. And I asked Danny if they're looking into any sort of scheduling stuff like that, and he says there might be a 1-year pause. He doesn't want it to be permanent. He wants UCF in all sports to play big non-conference games, play against the best, because that's what UCF's trying to get to. But even a place like that, for a year, they may look at playing more stuff that's local. So it's something a lot of schools, especially the group of five, are going to look at because that adds up. It costs a lot of money to fly a baseball team down south if you're up north, or to fly a tennis team out to California. And in any way that they can save money without having to cut a sport is really what they're looking for, because we've seen a couple of schools cut sports already.
And I was going to ask you about that. How much chatter have you heard as far as programs that are just concerned about, hey, we're going to be able, they were trying to, the group of five sent that letter about maybe to stay Division I, drop the level from 16 sports to 12. That's been denied. How much chatter is that? Because I have concerns throughout some of the schools in the programs in G5, and it might, cross the board, like a Tulsa or schools in the MAC conference that might be dependent on a television contract where they play football games on a midweek. How much chatter is that about how much, potentially programs could lose as far as not only the Olympic sports, but even football programs could be lost here?
Yeah, I mean, Akron has already announced, I think, they want a 20% cut in the athletics budget. There was a call by somebody today that Kent and Akron should look at dropping football. Not that that's on the table, but someone was just saying that it should be. Eastern Michigan a couple years ago there was a push by some people around the school to try to get rid of football. If you don't have football this year, I would not be surprised if you see some FBS programs either drop down or cut the program or something like that. If you don't have football, there's going to be a lot of sports that are cut everywhere. It really comes down to they have to have football happen, because whether it's not even just TV. TV's a bigger deal, honestly, for the Power 5, where they have a bigger TV contract. The Group of 5 TV deals aren't that much money, so it's not as big a part of the budget, but it's ticket revenues, it's student fees. You need schools to come back. A lot of schools, Group of 5 schools especially, rely on student fees that come along with tuition to pay for a lot of these things too. So there's a lot of revenue streams in the Group of 5 that they're going to need to come back.
Chris, you mentioned the TV contracts, and the American just signed a new media contract with ESPN that is scheduled to take effect this July the 1st. What is the position, or your sense of the position of the American right now, given all that's happening after they had signed this particular TV contract? Are they in a better position than maybe they would have been prior to that? Given that there was a little bit of consternation in UCF circles about the length of the deal, but I get the sense that this actually turned out to be a pretty good situation and a pretty good safety net for the American at this point, even with UConn leaving. What about you, though? What do you think about how the American's TV contract is looking right now?
Well, it's some people, I don't know if this is official or not, but there are a number of people who think it's a bit backloaded, so it's not like I think it averages out to $7 million, and that's before whatever happens coming out of UConn. But it's more backloaded, and it's not going to be $7 million up front. I mean, it's clearly the best Group of 5 TV deal out there. It's still a bit ahead of the new Mountain West deal that was announced back in the late fall. Mm-hmm. It's obviously also nowhere close to the worst Power 5 deal. So the Americans always kind of been in that middle area. I think Mike wanted a long-term deal. The Mountain West didn't want a long-term deal. They wanted to wait and see how things were. The Mountain West is also TV heavy. It's not as online heavy. There's no ESPN. There's no ESPN Plus in there. So they're different conferences have had different strategies. I don't know if this TV deal means any more. I mean, obviously, if you're getting more money, it means good in light of what's going on. But I don't know how much more than that, depending on once it gets started and it still has to build up.
You mentioned you talked to Danny White and what he had to say earlier. What was he like talking to him about all this? As we do a lot of uncertainty, and even other athletic directors maybe in the American, and the tone that they're feeling. I mean, they're coming off a great year in football, obviously, and that's the big concern, is about when's football going to get played. But what was kind of the tone with them overall as you talked to Danny, maybe other athletic directors within the conference?
Well, Danny's a lot more, I don't know, I guess just cautious with his words in general, doesn't want to say anything's for sure happening, still waiting to see on a lot what's happening. They haven't had any pay cuts in the athletics department yet, like other schools have had. He's still kind of waiting and seeing. He's always kind of careful with what he's saying, and when he says something, when he says something that draws headlines, it's usually on purpose. So he was generally cautious about a lot of things. Nicole Auerbach and I have another story coming out probably later this week on the Group of 5 and stuff like that, and it'll be kind of involved in that. So he wasn't as open. I don't know. He's not in general as open of a guy as some other athletic directors, or even especially Mike Oresco, who will talk your ear off if you want to. So Danny's being cautious with things. He's optimistic, though. He says he's not thinking UCF's going to make cuts. It's more about just a pause on the planned growth that they had.
Yeah, Chris, and you kind of mentioned it there at the end. Because of UCF's recent success, certainly in football, and also because of its gigantic population, do you get the sense that UCF is in a better position financially to really go unscathed through this possibly than the Tulsas and the smaller schools and the lower end G5 schools and even the lower end AAC schools?
Yeah. I mean, Tulsa, even a year or so ago, they asked their coaches, including Philip Montgomery, to take a pay cut just based on where the budget was at the time in general. And Tulsa loved the new TV deal because it meant a lot more money for them. But especially a place like Tulsa, they had some budget issues for a while. And UCF's not in a position like that. They've basically, the message that Danny wanted to get across is that if anything gets held back or cut, it's going to be more of a pause on the growth that they have planned rather than any sort of cuts, at least where things stand right now. If football doesn't happen, then we have a whole other conversation. But that was the sense I got talking to Danny.
You hear that, guys? We're going to have to wait on the lazy river. It's a real bummer.
That's that's okay.
I didn't ask about that one specifically, but that is an example of. I don't know exactly where the construction stands on that, but it's a possible example of something that may be looked at.
I don't know about the construction, but I do know that all the funds have already been extracted because those were all private funding. So I know they have the money for it. I don't know about the construction though. I did have a question about something you wrote earlier on Monday. You did a really cool survey, I thought. With G5 fan, you got 1,700 responses from fans across G5 fan bases, asking general questions about the G5, and then asking conference-specific questions for those fans about how they like their commissioner and how they like their TV deal, and as an example, a lot of fans want an expanded playoff, which is no surprise. And in the AAC, it seems like most fans would rate Mike Oresco's performance to somewhere between good to very good, which I think some UCF fans are probably tearing their hair out hearing that, but I think it's true. I think going through this, what did you look at either among the very broad questions for the G5 fans or just the AAC specific questions? What are the answers that maybe surprised you most?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if there was much that surprised me. I mean, I asked if the group of five should have its own playoff. Not that I was just generally curious what the temperature was on that, and that was 85% said no. Not a surprise there. I was honestly thought it'd be more than that. Did not want it, but I don't know how the best way to put this. So I asked about if you had to pay to watch your team on a streaming service, how likely would you do that? And 60% was 4 or 5 very likely to do it. And I was kind of surprised. That seemed high to me. The other hand, you have to pay for a subscription to The Athletic, so maybe the people who are doing the survey are already willing to pay for that kind of stuff. I asked about name, image, likeness, which obviously came out Wednesday morning. If you think that would help or hurt the group of five or a mixture of that. Almost half of the people said it's going to further the Power 5 group of 5 divide, but about a third said it'll help some, hurt others, and I think that's probably where it's going to end up happening. I mean, Miami of Ohio announced a partnership with someone who works on athlete brands. Obviously, UCF went through the situation, I don't remember the kid's name, but the punter who had the YouTube show, that's the kind of thing that would be legal now. And so it could help certain people, it could hurt other people. And yeah, as it relates to the American, let me count this out. Almost about 70% rated Oresco a 3 or a 4 out of 5. Only 12% out of 5. He was among the most popular commissioners based on each group of 5 conference. And I know UCF fans are not big fans, but generally everybody else in the league has been. And when I asked about the TV situation in the group of 5, for the American, most of that was a 3 to 4. Not 5 was very low, but above average fans of the current TV situation. Speaking of something we just talked about.
Yeah, I think it was pretty interesting. One of the other questions that you asked was you asked everyone in those respective conferences, where would you rank your conference among the G5? And the American was almost unanimously number 1. And what I thought was interesting about it was that even the Mountain West fans, the majority of them did not think that their conference was the top G5 conference. 54%, I think, had them at 2. And I think that the fact that these conferences are kind of, or at least in terms of the fan bases, are stratifying themselves kind of lends that idea to the strength of the programs within them of possibly, if there's any sort of conference realignment down the road, which I think we're all holding our breath for 2024, 2025 now, that there might be another round of schools that move up, don't you think?
The thing with realignment is you don't really know what's going to drive it. What drove it last time was TV, and everybody wanted a network, a conference TV deal. And now, people are moving away from TV. The Pac-12 network was a disaster. Cable subscriptions keep going down. It's not like you don't necessarily need to add a market anymore like you did a decade ago, which is what sparked a lot of that realignment. Maybe this, it's possible the fallout from this pandemic leads to more regional realignment. That, talking to people even with Conference USA, that doesn't seem to be on the table right now, but it's something that people have wondered long term if this is something that could lead to that. But in the meantime, you don't know. The American is in that spot where they're in the middle. They're clearly above the other Group of 5 leagues when it comes to what they pay their coaches, what they're doing on the field, TV deal, stuff like that. But they're still pretty far away from somebody else in terms of the money coming in. So it's kind of a weird spot, and it's why I think more than anything, more than realignment, even though I know that's the big thing, especially for UCF, I think the big thing will be playoff expansion. And if there's an automatic spot for the Group of 5 in there, and say that goes to the American most years, then you could really start to see possibly a shift in feelings. I think that's where it's going to start.
Could you see realignment within conferences like the Sun Belt, for example, in Conference USA after all this is done? Because there's going to be financial hits here, and and as we've talked a lot about in this interview, and obviously you and Nicole have written about geography scheduling. I'm wondering, could you see in the future some realignment as far as geography friendly to help also financially, instead of, especially if certain conferences lose certain programs? Could you see that maybe in the forefront as far as realignment within the Group of 5s?
So that's I know a lot of people have tried to merge, basically split up the Sun Belt and Conference USA into two more geographic conferences. The thing is, the Sun Belt is already pretty good geographically. It's really only Conference USA that's a mess, because they stretch from El Paso to Norfolk, even into West Virginia. They're all over the place. I have not gotten a sense from anybody in the Sun Belt that they're interested in any sort of trading of teams with Conference USA, because I think they're in a pretty good spot in terms of the number of teams I think they're comfortable with and who they have. They added Appalachian State and Georgia Southern from FCS, and those are two of the best programs in the league now. So I don't know if there's, outside of a couple of teams, I don't know if there's really a ton of appetite to move things around from the Sun Belt. Conference USA absolutely would make sense, and Conference USA, as we wrote in our story, might look at something like divisions within the conference for Olympic sports. So you don't have to have your volleyball team in Huntington, West Virginia, travel to El Paso, or a baseball team do something like that. So you might see, even just within Conference USA, either fewer conference games or divisions in other sports to get around that travel issue. I think that's more likely to happen than something like realignment, at least anytime soon.
Chris Vannini, you can find his work on The Athletic. Guys, Brian and Eric, did you have any other things that you wanted to ask about? Because we're just past the 20-minute mark.
Yeah, I'm good. I really appreciate Chris coming on and giving just some really thorough answers. Appreciate that, man.
I'm good, Chris. Man, that was awesome.
Cool. All right, Chris Vannini from The Athletic. Catch his work there on The Athletic as well. And before we let you go, Chris, I know you said that something that you and Nicole Auerbach were working on something about the Group of 5 coming up this week. What are some of the other projects that you'll be working on that you think UCF fans might be interested in coming down the pike?
Yeah, well, we got a ton of stuff off of Name, Image, Likeness Wednesday. Nicole had a good look at what it means moving forward. Andy Staples had a column on some of the problems with it. Got a lot of good coverage on that. We've got a series of coaching stuff next week. We're going to have some interesting stories on coaches who had weird jobs outside of coaching. Obviously, there's not a lot of sports going on, so we can't necessarily write about that, but we're going to start up our State of the Program off-season preview series pretty soon where we go through, I think, 70-plus teams. I'll be doing a bunch of Group of 5. I'll be doing one on UCF later in May, kind of my program breakdown of where everything stands. So that's some stuff to look forward to, I think, moving forward.
All right, and we can and just so everyone knows how they can reach out to you, where's the best place to find you, Chris?
Just on Twitter at Chris Vannini, ChrisVannini.
All right, folks, and if you're looking for Chris's work as well, make sure you follow him at The Athletic. Subscribing to The Athletic is, believe me, just to read Chris's stuff is more than worth the price, and you get everything else that you can get from your region, as well as some of the best coverage in sports out there. Chris Vannini from The Athletic, thank you so much for joining us. Continue to stay safe, and hopefully we'll be able to hit you up down the line and actually talk about some football, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks again to Chris, and you can follow him on Twitter, of course, at Chris Vannini, and all of his work at theathletic.com. That was good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about somebody who's sharp and plugged in, man. It's always fun to talk with somebody who gives us the lay of the land. I feel we get so locked into the UCF bubble so many times that it's hard to contextualize what's going on, and Chris does a good job of that.
He does. I mean, the survey that he talked about where Mike Oresco is approved by the American Conference fans. I think that's a great, to get a perspective. What is it like outside of UCF? And I think Chris and others do a great job there at The Athletic. My biggest takeaway, and I think it's going to be interesting, right? There's so much speculation, which is Murph's favorite thing, is people speculate, will there be a season? What kind of season will there be? Like, even though we're doing this audio, I can just see, I was envisioning Murph's facial reaction when you ask Chris Vannini about, give me a predict when we're going to have football. I can just see Murph cringing. Just wanted to kind of come up. If he could strangle you, Jeff, I think he would have.
I respect Chris's answer because he did sort of. He didn't say like it's definitely going to be this. He gave you his personal opinion, but I think also he understands like he's not Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx, but he gave you an honest answer from his point of view, which I thought was all we really needed at that point.
Right, but I think the interesting thing, and we touched on the scheduling, and the fact that there's a lot of G5 programs, because there's been talk about, well, maybe, we'll just do a conference schedule only. Well, there's a lot of issues that come with that. That's not as simple as it sounds because, and Chris brought up the point, there's a lot of G5 programs that depend on that non-conference schedule to make money. Right? Like the going up to a Michigan or going up to Oklahoma or playing that one-time buy-in game or, whatever. Those are money impact games for a lot of programs in the G5. They could get hurt by the fact that there's not if there's no non-conference, which I think presents a ton of issues. Like, it's funny. Everybody just keeps bringing up like, oh, we'll just do conference schedules. No problem. Like, well, what happens to Notre Dame and BYU in that scenario? Like, do they not have a season? Like, so... And maybe just hanging out with Murph has kind of won me over. I used to be the optimist in a lot of this stuff, but I do understand where Murph gets from with some of the annoying parts about, oh, we'll just do a conference schedule, no big deal. Like there is no issues. Like no, there are issues with that. There are programs that depend on non-conference games. There's programs like Notre Dame, BYU, and there's other independents, Army, that are not in a conference. So how are they going to play a football schedule?
Or even, I hate saying it, but it's true, like South Florida. Like they're scheduled to go to Austin to play Texas this year.
That's a moneymaker for them. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's not as simple for a South Florida to just give up that game with Texas, for example. That's a big game for them, and I'm sure a lot of G5 programs have that issue. So, look, I think there's a lot of questions, and I'm on Murph's side in that, it's great for all of us to speculate and come up with different theories, but there's a lot of things that could change, and there's a lot of things we still don't know. And I think for people to just say, well, we'll just push it back to spring, well, that's not that easy because odds are maybe things could be worse in the spring. I mean, usually a lot of people get sick in the spring. What if you still can't have fans? What happens there? So I think there's still a lot of questions and mysteries. But, obviously they're going to try to get a football season. But I also think it's not as simple as, hey, we'll drop the non-conference schedule and we'll just move on. It's not that simple. That creates a lot of problems and financial issues, especially in the group of five.
Yeah, the thing for me that he brought up was scary was what if the virus flares up again in the winter?
Right.
And the further back you push football season, the likelier it is that might rear its ugly head while games are taking place. What do you think, Brian?
I thought just Chris overall, I really enjoy how he didn't give you, he's not here to give you hot takes. He's really here to really give you facts
that's why everyone listens to us, right? For the hot takes.
Well, yeah, right. Yeah, that's why podcast is so popular.
Right.
But Chris is not out here on a limb trying to like connect the dots for you. He really is just kind of giving you what he knows, and I think that's an honest way to go about it. It's not a sexy or a very fancy way to go about it, but it's honest, and I think that's what people want. I thought he's just very thorough and very knowledgeable. It was great.
So I think that the biggest thing is that Chris, and Nicole and everybody over there at The Athletic, they do the legwork on this kind of stuff. And the big takeaway that I come at it is, the correct answer to all these questions that everyone has right now on April 29th is we don't know. And I always say that's the least satisfying answer in the history of the world, but it's true. We just don't know. And we're in an environment where, especially on, in the modern communication environment, where we want to know right now. And, right. And we need to know. We look for every single little scrap of speculation or information from any kind of official sounding source. The fact is they've done legwork and they said, we don't know. We just have to wait and see. And I think that, the fact that he brought up, we may have some crystallization of the picture in May, but again, it's, we're not doing this on college football's timeline. We're doing this on COVID-19's timeline.
Yeah, but
the virus sets the timeline.
But here's the thing. It's May. The point is there doesn't have to be a decision right now. And I think that's what Chris brought up. We probably doesn't have to be a decision until mid-June. Who knows what happens in June? So we don't need to be making decisions today. We don't need to be freaking out about decisions today. Time will figure itself out, and things could pop up that change your perspective between now and the fall.
Well, all right. To be fair, you're right about that. But I think the one thing that all three of us know, and Chris knows as well, is that people who work in athletic administration, right, they want to have as much lead time as possible. They hate making decisions based on incomplete information. And when you're facing those two converging freight trains of time and money, right, they want to try and make sure that they have enough time to tell their coaches and administrators and the student athletes and everything to get ready or not. They don't want to put it. Obviously, their first order of business is they do not want to put anyone into any undue danger, but they also understand that if the entire athletic department at, like, say, Eastern Michigan folds, they don't want it to happen on their watch. So it's and these people are also extremely resistant to change, and so they're all operating by the seat of their pants here, and I get that, but you know what? This is why they get paid all that money, is to make these decisions in crisis. So we're going to find out. I really think we are. This is going to be the great filter, right? We're going to find out which athletic departments were the ones who were well run and which ones weren't. And I think we're already seeing the ones that aren't being well run right now. Possibly, right. Old Dominion, Cincinnati. You got to drop a sport right now. I mean, say what you want to about, is COVID-19 an excuse for dropping those sports? Bottom line is, you had them going this long. So, that tells me that they're having quite a bit of trouble. And when, and we're going to look back at this time, maybe a year from now and say, wow, well, look what we wondered back then. In the end, maybe we should have known X, Y, and Z. But anyway, thanks again to Chris Vannini from The Athletic for joining us here on the podcast. Chris Vannini on Twitter. Great follow on Twitter, by the way. He's fantastic. So all the latest stuff that's up there, make sure you follow him for more. All right. When we get back, we are going to talk about some NFL draft news. I know you guys have been looking forward to that for quite some time now. One player drafted into the NFL draft from UCF. That's Gabe Davis. What's the latest on the free agent market? We'll be updating you on that and plenty more as we continue. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you. Follow us on Twitter, UCF_Banneret, also Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret, and you can follow us on blackandgoldbanneret.com, where we have our UCF NFL free agent signing tracker and plenty of coverage from the 2020 NFL Draft, which I don't know about you guys. I loved how stripped down the draft was. It was just... They completely dispensed, obviously, with the pomp and circumstance. I mean, do you saw the plans that they were going to have? It was supposed to be in Vegas, right? And they were going to bring out the draft picks up to the podium, like using a boat on the fountain at the Bellagio or something, right? I mean, it was preposterously over the top. Instead, it just ended up being the world's biggest Zoom call, or the world's most watched Zoom call, and I loved it. I thought the coverage was fantastic. And what probably the highlight of it was in the fourth round when we heard Gabe Davis's name called as an NFL draftee. Gabe goes to the Buffalo Bills in the fourth round. He went on day 3. Some folks were hoping that he would go day 2. Didn't work out that way because it turns out that he was projected to go day 3, pick number 128 to Buffalo. As he should have been. And yeah, so Gabe goes to Buffalo. We're going to talk about the free agent signings in a little bit. But first, Brian Murphy, Gabe Davis, Buffalo Bills. Your outlook, what did you think about it? Is this a good spot for him?
I think it's an interesting spot. Obviously, people will say, well, who's his quarterback? And his quarterback is Josh Allen for now, although they drafted Jake Fromm, and the opinions there can vary. But if it's Josh Allen, obviously he's got a huge arm, and Gabe runs really well. He runs deep routes quite often, so that would seem to be a match. Although obviously there's questions about Josh Allen's accuracy. I think overall it's a fine place for him to learn, and what I mean by that is there are reasons why that Gabe lasted until the fourth round. I think one of the key ones was because of UCF's passing offense system, which runs a lot of posts and a lot of 9 routes and a lot of slants. He didn't run a extremely versatile route tree this year, and the fact that he didn't, and he does need to learn how to run a route tree, a full one, in the NFL level, is one of the reasons why he was drafted as late as he was. And yet he lands in Buffalo, where he will be teamed with arguably the best route runner in the NFL, in Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
And John Brown, for a guy who's mostly known as a deep threat track star kind of speed guy, he runs really good routes for a guy of his skill set. He runs deep routes. Gabe runs deep routes, and they should be able to learn. He should be able to learn from them and really shore up his weaknesses and become a better player. Where does he fit in the offensive system? I mean, he's at absolute least or most the third receiver in an offense that's got Josh Allen and quarterback, and then Devin Singletary, where they're gonna run the ball for most of November and December because you don't really throw the ball much in Buffalo in the winter. But I think in time, in like 3 years, I see him being. I look at him and I can see him being like an Alshon Jeffrey type of player. Maybe not with that amazing amount of not as amazing with the leaping ability and the pure athleticism that Alshon had. But just in terms of the body, fighting for balls, the long strides, touchdown targets, he's the kind of player I could see him becoming.
Eric, you made a great point, and I want to credit OS Nice, the Orlando Sentinel, for tweeting this out. According to Spot Track, Davis's rookie contract is slotted to be in the range of $3.3 million with a $699,000 signing bonus. And you brought up the great point. Like, for all the people out there who are saying that Gabe leaving was a mistake, that's a lot of money he's going to get paid, right?
Yeah. That's a good deal. 4th round. Like, anybody that thinks he made a mistake leaving early is an idiot. I mean, no, seriously, you need your head examined, because anybody that's
I'll take $699K off the top.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. To me, his stock is never going to be much higher. And Brian just brought up some of the reasons why he was a 4th rounder. That wasn't going to improve going back to UCF. So in anything, you could make the argument, and I remember this, it was Friday night. Brian was following the Green Bay Packers as a possibility, because that was always some chatter, right, Murph, before the draft, that they liked him, and you were kind of eyeing that late 3rd round pick as a possibility, because at that time Green Bay hadn't selected a wide receiver, and we thought anyway. At least
turns out they never did.
No, they didn't, because the Green Bay Packers decided to use the 2020 draft to improve the 2023 Green Bay Packers instead of the 2020 Packers, which is a very interesting way of using the draft. But nonetheless, that's the only reason why he dropped to the 4th round. I mean, he's got some flaws, but he skyrocketed up to the 4th round. I mean, who knows a year from now if he was even draftable? Maybe he wasn't. This was, by the way, a deep, deep wide receiving class. And by the way, next year is going to be also very deep. So I think he made the right move. He landed right about where everybody thought he would, which was some point in the 4th round. I think Brian does a good job there breaking down the pluses and minuses of Buffalo. I'm personally not a fan of that spot, because I'm not a Josh Allen fan. I think that's a bad fit. Maybe Jake Fromm replaces him down the road. I do have, and not to mention there's bad weather in Buffalo, 2 to 3 months a year. And by the way, he's got to spend a lot of time in Buffalo, New York, which is, that's bad. But I mean, despite that, the good news is you can spend the off season back here in Florida, a good city with weather that actually has things to do. But I think hopefully it'll work out for him. I kind of see him kind of like what Traquan is right now with New Orleans, where maybe once in a while, every 9-10 games, maybe you pop in, catch a touchdown, have a big game, but not really be consistent, at least not for in the first couple years.
I think you also one other guy that's also up there too that you I forget if you mentioned Brian and Eric, was Cole Beasley, who's also up there. Pretty interesting group of team. Gabe is going to be paired with obviously you mentioned Devin Singletary, who he played against from FAU back in the day, and also on the other side of the ball, Ed Oliver, a guy from Houston, is a starter for Buffalo, as a starter last year. So, I mean, it looks like there's some pretty decent talent. I mean, I think you're right. The big question is, will Josh Allen throw anything more than a swing out? We just don't know at this point. Nothing says he can't. Right, but nothing says he can't improve. But their base offense is 3 wideouts and 1 running back. So, I think there are a lot worse places that he could have gone. It's not the best place, but obviously they thought he was pretty good. So if that's the team that wants him, hey, he's going to get his shot. That's the thing I always say is guys always say the same thing, and you guys have talked to players. All I want is a shot. If I get a shot and I don't make it, I can live with that. Gabe's going to get a shot, And
look, it's not like the wide receiving core is like, oh man, you're never going to be able to crack that list. So,
right.
He's just got to get better, and he's in a good spot from that standpoint, and he'll work hard, and hey man, it's exciting. You're in the NFL. That's a pretty cool feeling. So, and a team that could win the division this year. Who knows? They were a playoff team last year. Could be a playoff team again. Will probably be the pick by everybody to win that Eastern Division. So. All things considered, it's good to be Gabe Davis. So I'm very happy for him. And like Murph has said 1,000 times, that's why you should have no issues with any player that declares early and get compensated and get paid. And he's in a good spot.
Yeah. We were mildly surprised, I think, that Gabe was the only UCF Knight taken in the 2020 NFL draft. I think the guy that we thought would most likely be the second Knight taken was Nevelle Clarke. So we're going to go over the undrafted free agents now. Nevelle goes to the Minnesota Vikings after a little bit of time that went by, but he signs with Minnesota. He will be a teammate of Mike Hughes up in Minneapolis. Really interesting situation up there, isn't it, Brian Murphy? Nevelle Clarke going to the Vikes.
I mean, it's fun in the fact that he is reunited with Mike Hughes, who obviously played together really as the starting cornerbacks for most of 2017. As far as a landing spot, it's going to be certainly a battle for him. It's certainly a roster. It's a franchise in Minnesota that needed to upgrade its cornerback depth, and even Mike Hughes will tell you like he needs to get better as well. He's one of the reasons why this team drafted 3 corners in the first 5 rounds. They needed to address that position. So there's a lot of guys that they've added already. They lost Xavier Rhodes during the offseason, but you could say, well, that may not be a huge negative considering the season he had in 2019. But now they've added 3 other guys, and now they add Nevelle as well. They obviously have a bunch of guys. They have some guys returning. So it's going to be pretty crowded. And I wonder, is there a spot for him somewhere to sort of fill in? It's hard to see one right now because when you take 3 cornerbacks in front of him in the actual draft, like those spots are gone. Mike Hughes has got a roster spot as well. And he's really not going to be like a nickelback type of guy. We've talked about how Nevelle is pretty pigeonholed into being a man-on-man press corner. Certainly he could learn other things, but that's really his strength. I just don't know if long-term that's a great fit for him.
They're a little shallow at safety. Do you think that they might try to move him over to that side?
Did he ever play safety at UCF? Because I will look that up real quickly because I wasn't here.
I don't think he did.
2015. I know he started playing in 2015, right?
Yeah. 15.
So this says defensive back, so I'm going to assume not, but I'll look into that. I mean, certainly he would have the size. He has the physical ability to track as a safety. He's not a great tackler, but he's willing to at least hit you. I still think as a corner or safety, certainly his lack of speed may actually help him more at safety because he doesn't need to keep up with a wide receiver on every single play. But I don't know how he'll take to that.
It did say he did play safety in high school, but that's a while ago. But still, he does have some experience.
Right. It's back in 2014 and before. That could be something. I just think it's going to be difficult for him to sort of make that roster unless he has a great camp, which again he may not be able to have the chance to have a great camp because of what we're currently dealing with.
The other thing, I mean, obviously all that notwithstanding, but the other thing is that he's one of those guys who's going to have to really show out on special teams too. And that's the other thing is that a lot of these guys are going to have to do that.
That was great to hear Gabe say that in his talk with the Buffalo media after he was drafted, right after he was drafted and before he went to catch passes from McKenzie Milton, he talked for about 12 minutes for the Buffalo media and said, he's obviously willing to do anything. Special teams is fine. So that's going to help you get on the field, sooner. And so really every rookie should have that mindset. I mean, every single one who's not like a top 15 pick should be ready if they're asked to go play special teams.
Speaking of guys who you would think would have to really show out on special teams, Nate Evans going to the Jacksonville Jaguars as an undrafted free agent. Like we said in the post about this, Murph, Jacksonville's been a good home for a lot of former Knights. Blake Bortles, AJ Boye, Dredrick Snelson is at least currently on the roster. Storm Johnson got a shot there too. We talked about before the draft about Nate being a tweener. How would he fit into that defensive scheme, do you think?
Yeah, I wonder. We should have our old colleague Zach Goodall on to talk about this one. But I do wonder if he is solely going to be a special teams player because of that tweener status of like he's just not tall enough and he has the weight, but he's not big enough, and he's also maybe probably not like quick enough to be an NFL linebacker, but he could certainly make it through effort and through special teams. I don't really see him fitting, not with the team specifically. I don't really know about that situation as much as just his overall skill set. I think he's really more of he's more of a special teamer than anything else. I don't really see him being a full-time starting linebacker in the NFL. But I will give Nate this, and we hope to possibly talk to him soon. And so we'll see what he has to say when we talk to him. But he has been working. If you look at his Instagram, he really hasn't not been posting any self-congratulatory stuff. It's really just been him doing in the gym, and he's continued to work and try to get stronger during this time. So that can only help. He's got a great work ethic and a fantastic attitude and a great leadership. But I do wonder if he's going to fit anywhere, no matter the team, just because of his body and his skill set.
Eric, what do you make of these two defensive guys here? I mean, we've seen, UCF is still producing some pretty good defensive talent, even despite the fact that, the defense at time has been that bend but don't break scheme that we always hear about, and maybe that doesn't show too well on the scoreboard. But these guys have put together good enough tape to get looks, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, not good enough to get drafted, but get at least to sign a free agent contract. I mean, some would argue that maybe the tape doesn't. Maybe he's not as great as we thought, right? Because one thing we have learned, and Peter King has written about this on his Monday Quarterback and has been on mostly a lot of radio shows. And the big thing about this draft is there was more tape watching than ever before by scouts, because that's all you can do. So
right.
And there's some that think actually that's better, that they think there will be less mistakes because of that. That sometimes by going to a pro day, you overthink things. And you over kind of complicate it. So who knows? We won't know that for a couple years. But I think of the two, I think Murph kind of perfectly described the Viking fit. That's a little odd. I think Neville, now with him, what might have hurt him too is he had some off-field discretions. I think going back in 2017, wasn't he? I think suspended in 2017, wasn't he?
Like, let's be honest. All right, he got caught smoking weed. Nah.
Yeah.
No, but you say
10 years ago, we would have cared.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though, right? Like, if you're a marquee player, that doesn't matter. But if you're a fringe player, that could make a difference.
I don't think it matters either way.
But that shouldn't hold him back. That should not be the reason why he goes undrafted. That was literally almost 3 years ago, and it's such a minor infraction. It really is in this time a minor infraction that it really should. I will say,
you never know with these NFL teams. You never know.
Oh, I understand. I am surprised that Nevelle didn't get drafted. I'm so surprised that there was an article on Nevelle that we'll never see, because I had already written up his Nevelle Clarke drafted in the so-so round by so-so team that never gets published. But you're right. But
thanks,
no, I think
Vikings.
That doesn't have an impact on Nevelle.
Right. So, go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
As far as linebacker situation is kind of interesting to me there, and I think he's got a shot there only because the Jaguars have gotten rid of a lot of guys. Maybe he can sneak in there as a backup, maybe be a special teams guy for the Jaguars. So if you ask me about the two situations, I kind of like Nate better of the two, personally.
I will add with Nate, so the Jaguars spent a couple of high-profile picks or drafted a couple of high-profile players at linebacker in this draft. In their second pick in the first round, they got the kid from LSU, Kayvon Chaisson. And then in the fourth round, they got Shaquille Quarterman, who's a pretty well-known name down here from Miami. That was in the fourth round after Gabe Davis got picked, which I know people at UCF were sort of flouting about the fact that a UCF player got drafted before a Miami player did. But the fact they did add Quarterman and especially Chaisson, it would make things tougher. Obviously, Jacksonville also has Miles Jack, I believe. So has Miles Jack as well. So
yeah,
there's some crowding there. Like I said, I think his way to playing time is special teams, and I don't think he'll have a problem with that.
Which takes us to the third, and so far as we know, final undrafted free agent signing, Adrian Killins, who went to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he was the first one to go, and that was announced virtually immediately after the conclusion of the draft. So clearly, the Eagles had their eyes on him, as did a number of other teams, according to Adrian's agent. So apparently, the Eagles gave him the best offer. Here's why I like this fit. All right, couple of reasons. First one is he's going to Philadelphia. He's working under Doug Peterson's system. Doug Peterson is an Andy Reid disciple, And it kind of makes me excited that maybe my Tyreek Hill comparison will probably come to fruition. Okay, I'm selfish about that. All right, number 2. All right, and this is probably the most accurate one. The Eagles are super thin at running back. All right,
Miles. I don't know if I agree with that.
Here you go. Miles Sanders, 2nd round pick. Okay, but last year was a rookie. Boston Scott, 6th round pick. They suffered some injury problems. They have Corey Clement. They have, and then they have Elijah Holyfield, who actually comes over to them from Carolina, who, by the way, is Evander Holyfield's son. And Adrian can kind of fit in, possibly, if he can work his way up. And again, we talked about the importance of special teams when you're an undrafted free agent. Can work his way up. He's going to be, and he's also going to be in I think, the perfect system for him. That sort of, that modified West Coast spread that Peterson runs, that's not far off of what Andy Reid was running this past year. Obviously, with Kansas City, they've evolved this offense to a new dimension. It's not the old Joe Montana West Coast. It's something totally new. And also there might be some opportunity for Adrian to show off his wares in the passing game too. You know, we don't know what's going to happen with Deshaun Jackson. They're a little. It looks like they're a little thin in the back end at wide receiver, although they did draft Jalen Reagor. They also have Greg Ward Jr. back there. Remember the former Houston quarterback?
They traded for the 49er receiver Goodwin.
Marquise Goodwin, who but he's had some injury problems in the past. So I don't know. It feels like there might be a spot for AK in Philadelphia. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I'll have Eric go first since he's sort of. Back on your insinuation.
Okay, I'll let Eric make fun of me. Go ahead.
No, I mean, look, I think some people would say that. I mean, Doug Peterson, if anybody is willing to use a free agent running back, it is Doug Peterson. So you're right about that. The issue is I think Miles Sanders is really good, and he really showed signs of that in the second half last year. I think he's the feature guy, and I think Boston Scott is legit too. I think the question, and you brought it up, is special teams. Can Killins make a special impact there? Because I think there's another runner they're going to use there. And Sal Palantonio mentioned this on Scott Van Pelt's show, and that's Jalen Hurts. They took Jalen Hurts at the 2nd round to be a quarterback, but he's going to use him on the field, and he's going to use his legs. So that's almost like an extra running back. And I think Hurts will be a factor in that. So I just don't know. Again, could Killins make the team? Yeah. I think special teams is probably his best shot to make an impact. I just don't. There's just a lot of football. I don't know if there's enough footballs there for him to have a significant role. They do like Corey Clement. Now, to your point, he's been injury prone. Maybe they cut a Corey Clement, something like that. Ideally, having watched the Eagles a lot, can Adrian Killins be a Darren Sproles type? That's the question. For him to be successful offensively, can he be Darren Sproles, where he's a weapon out of the backfield? But that means he also has to pass protect as well against bigger guys in the NFL. And those are things he's going to have to work on. And we'll see. We'll just have to see. And here's the thing. We don't know if the Eagles are done making moves or not. That's the other thing. What if they add a Devontae Freeman later on in the offseason, or a Dion Lewis or whoever? You got to hope if you're Adrian that they don't. And then you got to Murph's point. You got to hope you can impress people on a camp or a preseason or whatever. If there's none of that, they're not just going to throw him out there if all of a sudden it's a quick turnaround and they got to play regular season games. So he might just spend the first year, if he makes the team, probably on like a practice squad.
By the way, we do know that AK, even at 5'7", will not be the shortest guy in the Philadelphia backfield. That honor belongs to Boston Scott, who is all of 5'6". Go ahead, Murph.
Well, a lot of things there. The Darren Sproles comparison is, I get it, because you need to do a bunch of different things. You need to run and catch and be a dynamic punt returner. What helps Sproles is that for a guy his size, he was incredibly tough, really hard to bring down. He had huge thighs, and Adrian is not built like that. Adrian is more of a streamlined 170-pounder, 165-pounder, where Darren Sproles was so much of a lower gravity guy. It was low center of gravity guy. It was really hard to tackle him. Miles Sanders, I like him. I don't think he is as much of a roadblock as maybe Eric said. His athleticism is really good, and he can make the phenomenal play. He does make a lot of simple mistakes where if you watch their games and then watch like the film, which, by the way, right now NFL Game Pass is free and it's amazing. That you
free plug.
Is free. Is that you can watch him sort of not always like pick the right hole, and he doesn't always have great vision for where to run or where to hit it. So I wonder if that maybe annoys coaches at some points where he's leaving yards on the field. And I do wonder if that comes back to bite him later on. I'm not as big of a fan of Boston Scott or Corey Clement. I think Boston Scott's a pretty he can be a decent player, but Corey Clement's clearly just a guy. So I think there's space for him in the backfield, but there should be a place for him in gadget play for AK in gadget plays or kick return, punt return. I mean, when you get his speed, because of his speed, he has a trait that's greater and more game changing, and that teams can use more so than anything Nevelle Clarke has, more so than anything that Gabe Davis has. He has something that is really a wild card, and that's his speed. And I just think if you put him anywhere in open space, you can maybe pop something, once or twice a game. He's never going to be an every down back, nor should he ever be. He should never run up the middle ever again, ever again. We have seen him pass block quite a bit at UCF. I mean, at least he did it. I'm not going to say he was outstanding, but he showed the willingness and the toughness to do it, and sometimes did it well. But really, his money's going to be made as a dynamic gadget player on special teams or on the offense. And I think there's space in that offense for him to do that, because I don't think there's someone like him in that rotation. And I'm not as wowed with Boston Scott and Miles Sanders as some others are, and Eric, but others too. I mean, others too.
By the way, Miles Sanders is a rookie. It was a rookie year. Like, cut the kid a little slack, man. Holy smokes.
And then he's better in year two. That's totally fine. Maybe he's better in year two, but he just left a lot of yards on the field.
Yeah.
Two things. Now, Jeff, I think this is a good point now, to your point. Doug Peterson is the type of coach, to Murph's point, that would know how to use Adrian in a gadget play, right?
Right.
And you brought up the Tyreek Hill example. While Murph, that's maybe it's a stretch. At the same time, I think the concept is similar in that, hey, Andy Reid figured out how to use Tyreek Hill, in very different ways. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is a way better player. I'm not suggesting they're the same player, but Andy Reid knows how to be creative with certain players and certain styles, and Doug Peterson learned from Andy Reid. So I think, Jeff, that's the thing that's got in Adrian's two things that has in Adrian's best is going for him very well. That's a positive. He's got a coach in Doug Peterson that is not afraid to be imaginative with the playbook. So I think that does help him. I mean, they used Greg Ward last year as a wide receiver.
Right.
So I think that does help Adrian. So I hope you guys are right, because I'm an Adrian fan. Let me just say for the record, I'm always just pessimistic on how you fit in a backfield situation when there's a ton of backs and you don't know what's going to happen. But you're right. I mean, it's not like Hall of Famers in front of him. The other thing he's got going for him is he's going to play the Giants twice a year, and now you should feast on that.
Now, Eric.
Easy. One little note, Eric. I know you mentioned Dion Lewis. Dion Lewis actually signed with the Giants a couple days ago.
Oh my God! Well, that exploded.
I know. Yeah, going to the Super Bowl.
Oh God! Please no.
Compliment to Barkley. Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. All right.
I back him up. Anyway, go ahead, Murph. I'm sorry.
I'll bring up the fact that Philadelphia's return men last year consisted of Darren Sproles, who is now retired. I believe he's retired, right?
He's not listed on the active depth chart.
I believe yes.
Yeah. Nelson Aguilar, which is funny. Corey Clement, who again should not be on like punt and kick returns because the guy like runs like a 4.6. I will say, as far as we're looking, and they also had Boston Scott back there, but if Boston Scott's the number 2 running back in this offense, do they really want him to do that? I will say that the drafting of Jalen Reagor would certainly provide a outlet, or would provide Philadelphia a guy to be a punt and kick returner if they wanted one. I know he's a first rounder, but he is still a rookie, and you could see him being used on punt returns, kick returns. That could block AK because Reagor, does have 4.3 speed. But again, he has a shot there. There's certainly, I like the fit more with AK in Philly than in any other of the spots we talked about with Nate in Jacksonville or Nevelle in Minnesota. I like AK's choice the best.
Sproles did retire, by the way. He took a front office job with the Eagles. But, it pains me to say this as a Giants fan, but a great spot for AK to land. I think out of everybody, of all the free agents, based on what we've seen, obviously we hope all of them sign in. And we have no word yet on some of the other guys, like Jordan Johnson. Unfortunately, I can't believe no one's taken a shot on him yet. But I can't believe it.
Talk about that, Jeff.
Yeah,
okay, let's talk about that. Because Murph, I know that you've been in touch with JJ, right? So what's the deal? What the hell is going on?
You know what's so funny is after the draft, goes down, and after the Mr. Irrelevance picked, we're all waiting now with bated breath to see who's going where. And that time, those few hours after the draft, are chaotic times when you think you're going to have a handful of guys signed. And it was weird for UCF to see kind of how slow it was. You had AK signed quickly right away, and then I think Nate Evans was second, and then Nevelle Clarke was third, but he was like an hour after the draft, and then that was it. And it was curious to me just because you had seen projections with Jordan Johnson being projected as a priority free agent signee, and just looking at him, a 4-year starter and a guy who, if you're running a zone blocking scheme, a move center, a guy who can pull either way really well. I mean, you saw how often UCF ran behind him in their schemes this year. I'm surprised that he doesn't get a look. So I reached out to JJ on Saturday night because I was just curious. We hadn't seen anything or heard anything about him, and he said he had not heard from any team. And since then, there's been no news on that front. So I assume that Jordan Johnson has not heard from any teams, and that's really unfortunate. And I know Jordan's going to be great in whatever path he chooses professionally in life, be it in football or elsewhere, because he's just a phenomenal human being. But I just wonder, he could really work in a zone run scheme, in a zone blocking scheme. I don't understand how he can't at least give him a chance.
Yeah.
Whatever.
He reminds me of he would be the perfect center for remember the late '90s Denver Broncos?
Yeah,
the quintessential zone running team. Terrell Davis and all that. I know there's a lot more teams that run that, obviously in the 20 years since then, but which seems some unbelievable 20 years already. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One thing I do hope he latches on, because remember when we talked to him preseason, I asked him, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" He says, I want to be a sports commentator. And I thought, well, geez, I mean, I hope you can at least spend a few years in the NFL before you come take our jobs, because, I mean, geez, right? I mean, he's going to be good at, like you said, he's going to be good at whatever he does, whatever he puts his mind to.
He'll be fine. But let me ask you both this, though, because, like I said, they've watched tape. Do you think, and we've talked about the offensive line struggles at times last year, when they, especially in the losses, could it be that people see things in the tape that just didn't make Jordan look good offensively? I mean, that's I am surprised that to not have at least a free agent deal. Clearly they saw something in the tape that they didn't like. I have to believe. No,
Jeff, you want to feel that first?
Okay. I think that. Well, I mean, you and I debated on Twitter last week about what I think about the fact that he is one of those fringe guys who was probably affected by the fact that there was no pro day. I don't want to relitigate that, but
no, it's the quick synopsis. You believe that G5 programs got hurt by the draft?
No, not G5, G5, non-Power 5. So you're talking G5. I'm talking division. I'm talking FCS. Everyone who's not in the Power conferences.
Right.
Okay, because and I looked at this. And if you run the numbers of the last 5 NFL drafts this year, approximately 10 more Power 5 conference players went in the NFL draft this year compared to each of the last 4 years. And I don't have the tweet pulled up, forgive me, but usually it's about 70 to 71% of the NFL draft is Power 5 conference players. The rest obviously being G5, FCS, Division II, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This year, it was up to 75%, which is a pretty clear outlier.
The reason we disagreed is you don't point out the fact you have unique circumstances like a legendary team like LSU that ties the NFL draft record with 14 players. That has a factor into those numbers, and it's hard to make that argument when you got guys from Lemoyne Rhine and Dayton going in the first 3 to 4 rounds.
I get that. I certainly get that point, but here's my point. Is we talk all the time about the financial discrepancies between the Power 5 and the non-Power 5. And again, I just want to re-emphasize, we're not just talking about non-Power 5 in Division 1. I'm also talking about FCS. I'm also talking about D2. Because we've seen D2, D3 guys go in the NFL draft before, too. Including this year. I think only one guy from D2, though. But anyway, the resources that those schools have above all other things is, and this is the part that you don't see, and I actually discussed this with Robert Steig, who works for the Daily Stampede, is...
What would they know about an NFL draft? They don't get anybody drafted.
Okay. All right. But one thing we talked about, and I think it was pretty interesting, that the Power 5 programs have invested in tremendous resources for their players, especially with regard to video. Like, I saw it when George O'Leary came here and my old boss, John Kavadik, came in. One of UCF's biggest investments that nobody saw was this massive digital video server system that could not only pull and push game film to other schools, but could also easily, with a few clicks, spit out tape for any player that they wanted to look at, any sort of matchup that they wanted. It was a massive database, and this does not get talked about. The only schools that have that are the schools that have the resources to get it and keep it updated. UCF is one of the fortunate G5 schools that does have that, but all of the Power 5 schools have that because they had the money to install it years ago and they've been using it. I would venture a guess that UCF is one of the few G5 schools that actually has that resource available.
That's fine.
So that was my point about the not P5, non-P5 thing in particular. With regards to JJ, though, I still think, individually speaking, because the tape thing doesn't really matter, I think that he is one guy who probably could have benefited from getting FaceTime with some scouts at a pro day, because as we all know, like, everyone fawns over guys running the 40 and doing the shuttle. That's not what pro days are for. What pro days are for is basically job interviews with coaches and scouts. Brian, I think it was you that brought up the point that who was it that was there was a coach, an NFL coach who was it's with Tristan Hill.
Right. Rod Marinelli.
Right. Rod Marinelli was running those defensive line drills at the Nicholson Fieldhouse. And lo and behold, Rod Marinelli, the defensive coach for the Dallas Cowboys, they draft Tristan Hill. It was essentially that wasn't to show off Tristan Hill, and Rod Marinelli's not coming out there being, wow, I think I'm going to draft this guy. No, they already had him targeted, but there are a lot of other guys that they could have targeted. But they went and they got him because he basically had the right job interview with Rod Marinelli that time. That's what that's for. JJ and some of these.
That's why he
right. But no other teams really had the opportunity to do that. Maybe that could have pushed JJ over the top with someone. We don't know. So I do think that that not having those pro days because of COVID-19 was at least in part a disadvantage working against him. Now you could also say, well, that that's partially maybe that's also because he's a college spread offense center. He doesn't really have to hold his blocks very long. Although I will say that's a bit of a misnomer because UCF actually in one of his seasons UCF ran for more yards than they ever had in history, and he's the center on a predominantly running team. So I don't know. It still baffles me. I just don't know why he hasn't gotten a look yet.
But his size and his weight, he's not big enough to be a power run offensive guy. He is very system specific as far as where he would need to go. And again, the system is a zone blocking scheme. Like, again, it's not like teams don't run that in the NFL. There's teams that run that. So, but he is marginalized a little bit by the fact that he wouldn't work in every scheme. Still, just the experience and the type of person he is, and that is something that maybe enough GMs didn't get to know because they didn't get to talk to him or at least come face to face with him. You can go Zoom chats or whatever, but you don't get that pure interaction. Yeah. So even though he was marginalized in terms of what teams could draft and what types of offenses could draft him, it was still surprising to see him just not even get a ring, apparently, because he could fit somewhere in this league. Right. That was odd. And it sort of pushed back a little bit on Eric's point about guys that didn't hurt. Adam Troutman from Dayton, and then Kyle Duggar from, is it Lenoir? Lenoir?
I think it's Lenoir Rhyme.
Both those guys are at the combine, and that matters too.
Okay, no, that's a fair point. The combine helps a little bit there. There's just other guys. I would also point out there was no Ole Miss players taken in this draft. So it's not like my whole point is I think it does, and I agree with you. I think it hurts individuals. Certain individuals were hurt by not having a pro day. I don't think it's a G5 P5 thing. I don't think it's a non-Power 5 issue here. I think it's just individuals. And I will say this. I think George O'Leary, I will say this, with him and his staff, you talk about the video stuff, but they also ran pro set offenses, and they had schemes defensively where players were looking good on tape and can adapt. And Brian just brought up a point. Not that this is the coach's responsibility, because their job is to win games. But the current system is pretty simplistic, and that helps to win games, but that may not translate to be looking good on tape in the NFL. Maybe,
but then again, guys have been getting drafted from UCF who were on that tape from before, so I don't know. Maybe it's just. I would like to know.
Guys.
Right. Well, yeah, quite possibly, but they worked it. But they got the primary tape under Frost and Heupel the last couple of years. That's the thing. And the other thing too, and I don't know, Murph, maybe you know a good place to look this up. I would like to look at which NFL teams run predominantly zone blocking schemes, and then look at the centers that they have. There may only be maybe 10 teams that do that to the level where JJ could fit in, and maybe they all have 10 centers that they're happy with. That's only 10 jobs in the whole league,
I guess, and this is kind of cherry picking, but we know that UCF has had some guys in the league from the offensive line. Ja Reed and Josh Sitton come to mind. And I will say that Wyatt Miller did sign with the Jets as an undrafted free agent last year. Mm-hmm. But it is, if I think about it, UCF offensive linemen that have gone, certainly none have been drafted. UCF offensive linemen have not been drafted during the Frost Heupel eras of 2016. Now, I say that's cherry picking because the last UCF offensive lineman that was drafted was 2011. But maybe as time goes on, we'll see if this is more of a trend and not as much of a small sample size. We're only talking about 4 or 5 years here, but maybe there's something to that it works for college offense. It works for the offenses that UCF runs now with the wide, extra large spread offense that UCF runs, but it doesn't translate to the pro game, and that hurts the guys in the long run. But certainly from Heupel and Frost, they don't have offensive linemen on their draft results board.
Hey, Eric, you know which team ran the third most zone blocking run plays in the NFL last year?
We got the Eagles.
The Miami Dolphins.
Right, brother. Yeah.
So, you never know. And that's the other thing. Somebody might get hurt. We just don't know what's going to happen. So, there's the number one ability that coaches look for is availability. That's
a great stat that Murph just relayed on us, and I think he deserves credit for that. I did not realize that.
We should look that up a little bit further.
Ja Reed is the last offensive lineman get drafted at UCF 2011. He went in the third round in 2011. That is pretty good, Murph. Before that, Josh Sitton was a fourth-round pick in 2008. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty telling thing.
And again, some guys, I don't know everything about the undrafted free agents. That's different, but. And I'm sure I could look that up. I just don't have it on.
And by the way, that's also not a lot of guys.
And it's also just not that much of a time frame. And so I don't want to stress UCF doesn't create offensive linemen who are NFL worthy now. I don't really know that.
What we do know is they have produced defensive backs and wide receivers. That's clearly been the strength of this program.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I'm looking now at undrafted free agents from UCF history. This is great.
Oh boy.
What rabbit hole have I fallen into?
Live research as it goes on. Anyway.
Oh my God, live research. This is great podcasting.
Let's get out of here before we get. All right, so If anything does break with JJ or any of the other free agents, we'll be sure to you'll be sure to see it first at UCF_Banneret on Twitter. That is our most updated and most active social media channel. Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret as well for a lot of our in-depth stuff. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Follow us individually as well on Twitter. Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, Spokes_Murphy, and of course, blackandgoldbanneret.com, your home for UCF news wherever you may be, part of the SB Nation network. So as we wrap it up here, for Eric and Brian, I'm Jeff. Continue to stay safe out there. We know that there's a lot of folks out there who are kind of struggling through this whole process, but I don't know. Hopefully, we'll have a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, take care of yourself and yours. This has been.
Don't worry. By the way, Murph will tweet out any information he finds out that he didn't get to in this tweet during this episode as he's.
Can I just say it now?
Go for it.
Oh, you found it. Go ahead. Under the gun.
Because I know if I don't mention it now, people are going to be like, "Why did you forget about this guy?" It's going to be nuts. Remember, so let's not overlook the McRae brothers. Okay, both the McRae brothers were undrafted free agents. Both of them played in the NFL, but I believe
still do play in the NFL.
Right, but their last year was 2013.
Right.
And you had Charlie Hewlett, who is a long snapper for the Browns, or was for the Browns. His last year was, I believe, 2013 as well. Patrick Brown, who is like 2010s. So even among the undrafted free agents, among the 4 or 5 years here of Heupel and Frost, there hasn't been somebody who's played in the NFL. Now, again, this is still an amazingly small amount of time. I mean, you could draft a guy in 2016, and he may not just be ready to play. But I guess we'll see how it goes. I think come back in 5 years, and maybe there's something to it.
Wow, 5 years? That's a long time for an episode. All right.
Yeah.
All right. By the way, you can check me out on Eric Lopez Elo, as Jeff mentioned. A lot of content coming out on Black and Gold Banneret. Lots of great stuff coming up. Some cool interviews we're working on coming out as well. I was also on Mark Moses' show talking some UCF and also reviewing the movie Stupor with Dave Bautista. So you can check that out with Mark Moses, our good friend there.
Whoa, that's a deep cut.
Yeah, big one here, big debate. Like, if you only can pick one movie of these two to watch, Stupor or Hobbs and Shaw? If you're forced to pick one, Murph, which one are you picking?
Oh man, nothing. Mute.
Oh, come on. No, that's not.
No, I've seen Hobbs and Shaw, so I guess I'll go with that because I know. I'll take the movie I know more than the one I don't. When I know that maybe my expectations for both aren't very high. So no, I'll take a Hobbs and Shaw, but that is not an endorsement.
Fair enough. Also, you can check out our Adam Amin interview, which we've gotten great feedback, which I appreciate, by the way.
Thanks again to Adam. That was a fantastic interview.
I wasn't on that show, so I was listening to it after the podcast, after when the guys put the podcast this week. I love that. That was so good with him not only telling you what he was thinking about and feeling about and how he was going about the game during the game, but also like after the game and talking about the emotional stuff with his father, and it was really, really great. And for Adam Amin to give us more than an hour, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah, fantastic. And make sure you watch that because it was really one of the highlights of one of the great shows we've ever done here on Black and Gold Banneret. And thanks again to Eric for getting that done. So again,
he meant listening, by the way. He didn't mean watch. He meant listen.
Listen, yeah.
And you can read an article about the Griffin brothers. We had them on what was that day?
Right, they're speaking this weekend. That's right.
Yeah, they're doing the commencement, right?
They're doing the commencement, the virtual commencement for UCF on Saturday. UCF has its 13 or how many other ceremonies they are, and they are the virtual commencement celebration speakers. And so we got to talk to them on Monday, and I wrote up a thing that's on the website as well. You can check out. I think it was really good because they gave you insight into what they want their stories to be. And obviously, if you know the story of Shaquem and Shaquille, then you know what they're going to tap into. But there are other things there too that maybe you didn't know that they want to really stress to people and stress to the graduates of the class of 2020. So they were fantastic. They were fantastic on Monday.
Yeah, and they even got a shout out from JJ Watt on Twitter. So,
well, it's because they said they've been trying to learn. They've been trying to listen to good orators, and they've said that JJ Watt kind of fits their style.
Not bad. I'll go for it.
Cool, right? Because isn't our boy Jeremy part of that graduating class?
He is. Right? Jeremy Brenner, congratulations. He's going to be.
Yeah, he's a Texans fan. So JJ Watt, you're going to watch him graduate. That's pretty. Somebody relay that to Jeremy.
We'll have to let him know. So, again, follow us at UCF_Banneret, Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret, and blackandgoldbanneret.com. For Eric and Brian, I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll catch you later on in the week.